Jim, we used to have to take the pen away.
Yes.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Jacksonville Water and Sewer Advisory Committee today. We have one new member with us, Mr. Nicholas Semendaris.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Nicholas Semendaris. He's here, he lives in the city. He is the managing person with Delphi Construction. Delphi focuses primarily in commercial construction, but they have been very involved with some of our Habitat for Humanity houses. So I'd like to welcome him to our board.
Welcome.
All right. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
The first order of business is the adoption of the agenda. I hope everybody's had a chance to look at it, and if someone would like to make a motion to adopt or amend the agenda.
I make a motion to adopt.
And a second?
I make a motion to, as a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you. The next order is to adopt the minutes from the last meeting on September 10th, 2020. Do we have any discussion on last month's minutes? And if not, do we have a motion to adopt the minutes?
I make a motion to adopt the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our first order of business is a presentation by Ryan King on planning and development. Ryan?
Good evening. Thank you for having myself and Mr. Jeremy Smith, our senior planner, here this evening. I'm going to bore you with the overview for the benefit of the board, as well as those that may be watching on G10. I think it's been a year or two since we've been here. And also some new members that may not be familiar with what the Planning and Inspections Department does. And then I will ask Jeremy to kind of go over the development update that we are seeing around the city of Jacksonville now. So thank you for having us. We always enjoy coming. So kind of just to give the board a general overview, sorry, let me advance here. Planning inspections consists of two divisions, the planning and permitting office, as well as the building inspection. So the side on the left deals with stuff before construction. The side on the right deals with it after and during construction. Planning and permitting, we administer the Unified Development Ordinance. We maintain and update the CAMA land use plan. We serve as the liaison to the planning board. We process rezoning, subdivisions, site plans, special use permits, and plan unit developments. All of those things have a tie-in with different departments that kind of have a role in the plan review process, one of which being our engineering office, which looks at the utility infrastructure, which is kind of where the Water and Sewer Advisory Board comes into play. So we all work hand in hand to make sure that the infrastructure will support it. And, you know, when things are being talked about, you know, will we be able to support that development? And if so, what would be needed? And then some of our common applications, which are more on the construction side, you know, you want to occupy an existing building, you need to get a certificate of occupancy. If you want to change from a restaurant to an office building, that would be a change of use. All of these applications go through a review, certain requirements have to be met, inspections are done by either the zoning enforcement, fire, and or building inspectors. We want to make sure that the life safety components are met. Sign permits, North Carolina Alcoholic Beverage Commission permits, they start with our office, and multiple departments have a sign-off on that. In 2014, when City Council adopted the Unified Development Ordinance, we implemented a zoning permit requirement. That's where items that may be something that maybe it required a fire permit, but in the past it didn't require a zoning review, but could impact zoning, now has to go through a zoning permit process when required. We also take all the building permits. So any building permit starts and ends with us and is reviewed by multiple departments. A few other ones, and then kind of the last two there, you'll see we serve as kind of an intake only, where we support other departments so that we have one location that applicants can drop those off. We key them from a data entry standpoint, but then we pass those off to engineering as it relates to land disturbance, stormwater permits, and also, actually stormwater goes just to engineering. We're not involved with that part, but fire, we'll intake it and then pass it off to the fire department. So kind of the way our process works is you start with a pre-submittal conference usually where you want to talk about your project, and we let you know, okay, is it zoned appropriately? Is there infrastructure to support it? You'll go through the application process, review. Once you get that approval, then you'll start the permitting process to actually construct. During construction, you'll call for inspections, and we'll have multiple staff members that, whether it be building inspectors or construction inspectors, zoning officers, fire officials, that we go out to ensure compliance. And then everybody, what they want is that certificate of occupancy. That's when you can open to the public and start making money and provide services to the public. So building inspections, you know, they enforce and administer the state building codes. It's not a locally adopted rules. They're actually from the state. And we just simply administer them locally. Well, the building inspectors are very involved with disaster recovery. And they also assist our zoning and code enforcement officers as it relates to minimum housing, whether it be minimum residential or minimum commercial. And most of their days spent in the field performing those inspections. So with that, because that's kind of the boring overview, I'm going to turn over to Jeremy to discuss the development overview, because that's what's, you know, more exciting about what are we going to see, where's the development occurring, and what's going there where we see that those building framed up walls occurring. What's going to go there? A lot of times they'll put a sign coming soon, but sometimes they may just be out there doing site clearing and you're not really sure. Well, Jeremy's going to go over a lot of those projects that are kind of either just under construction or things that are in the pipeline, because that obviously impacts our overall water and sewer basin. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy Smith.
Thank you. Again, this is a development overview. I'd like to say it was brief, but we are busy. Even with the COVID-19 pandemic going on, we have stayed steady, especially on the commercial side and increasingly the residential. The first two slides are just a bulleted list of things that we've had going on. Most of you are familiar with the Gateway Marketplace. That's where Publix and Michael's and Ulta are. When that development was approved, they had 6 out parcels. 2 of those out parcels have now developed and are mini shopping centers or tenant spaces. I believe we have Blaze Pizza in one of them. Most recently is opened the Wingstop. We have the Burrito Shack, which is under its upfit construction right now. Should be opening soon. As of today, we did our first review on a physical therapy clinic. They've touted themselves as one of the top in the nation. And then largest, I'm sorry.
Either top or largest.
And then we still have 4 out parcels that can still be developed, be it tenant spaces, standalone restaurant, drive-through restaurants. We have yet to receive any indication or interest. And then there's, as again today, just we're wrapping up some things with the Gateway Marketplace and hopefully have that project as a whole, not the out parcels, but as a whole completed very soon. Carmax, some of you may have seen at the intersection of Piney Green and New Bern Highway. They've halted construction due to COVID-19. They called us in April and said, hey, we're going to take some time off just because they are out-of-state construction company, but they are coming back. Lidl, grocery store, coming soon. We are in the very initial phases of that. We have the Splash and Dash Car Wash, Smithfield's Chicken and Barbecue, Clean Green Car Wash, Moore's Barbecue, mini storages seems to be the ticket. Ryan, I've always said that Jacksonville goes through phases, be it apartments, grocery stores, hotels. They seem to come in waves. And most recently, the wave is mini storages. Somewhere, someone has done a study and said that Jacksonville was in desperate need of climate-controlled mini storages, and we received 3 project proposals and submittals right all about the same time. And then we'll move to our residential, the Vineyards, Harvest Meadows, Crescent Ridge, and Springfield Apartments.
One thing, if I can, Jeremy, go back one. On the residential piece, we really haven't had a single-family subdivision since Carolina Forest kind of finished up, and which is recent on the townhouse side. In Williamsburg Plantation, there's still a lot of acreage, but you know they're basically built out. And in the last couple of years, we've had 3 that have started the planning process, and one of which is probably the most visible is the one right there at Gum Branch, which is called the Vineyards. It was the old St. Lawrence tract. It's been talked about for years, but They've recently gone out there and timbered the property, and that's about the size of Carolina Forest. So we're just now starting to see the single family in Jacksonville kind of pick back up. And Jeremy will go into more detail with that in a moment.
A question, you had a number of car washes, and I know in the past, we had a big issue making sure car washes had reusable water. They weren't just going through the water at a great rate. Is that still the case? They're doing reusable, and is that a state requirement, or is that a city requirement, or is that just good practice on their part?
We'll let Wally answer that question, but from what I understand, it is still being done.
Yeah, it's a requirement. I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it's like something like 95% of the water has to be recycled. It's a high number that is required to be recycled.
State or city?
I know it's a city requirement. I don't know what the state
Okay,
requirement is.
so all these new car washes won't be a new burden really on our water usage.
Right,
Thank you.
a lot of the water is recycled.
Thank you.
So again, starting from the beginning, Gateway Marketplace, again, the home of the Publix, Alto Michaels, and Home Goods. I won't stay on this long. I gave a pretty good detail over what's going on. But we should see some further development of the 4 out parcels, and as well as the Western Forum across Western in the next few years, if not sooner.
If I can.
Sure.
There's what was identified as the second phase, which is the large tract on the right. That is not under the ownership of Gateway, but it's certainly a large 7 or 10 acre tract of land that could see additional development on it sometime in the future, but that is technically not part of Gateway at this time. Now, I'm sure that once it gets developed, it'll kind of take on the name Gateway, but that's not part of the first phase, so we're not sure what may or may not happen there, just so you know.
Is that between Gateway and Commons Drive, that section? Okay.
Carmax, again, this is on, what this map doesn't show, there's actually 2 parcels there. There's one where the rear parcel will be home of the regional stormwater pond for that North Marine Town Center shopping area. But Carmax will be up closer to New Bern Highway. We expect them to hopefully start construction again soon. They still have their equipment out on site, and I believe their signage has been constructed, so we are very obvious where they're located now. You'll notice too at the corner, directly on the corner of Piney Green is the Circle K, and then across to Piney Green from that was the old Kangaroo, I believe, and it was recently demolished. And we expect to see some development there in the next few years. Circle K, you may have heard or seen that they are on a very large national tear of new development. These are just 2 of the locations in Onslow County. It's my understanding that they have several other locations, not just in the city. But we have opportunities to work with them at the corner of Western and Gum Branch. This is directly across from is that an Exxon? Speedway. Yeah, Speedway. On Gum Branch and Western. They'll have access via as of right now, a driveway and future street onto Gum Branch, and they will access off of Western Boulevard as it goes into Williamsburg Plantation. Their other proposed location, which has received site plan approval and building permit approval, is the corner of Onslow Drive and North Marine Boulevard. This is the old Relo or Eckerd's location. They're going to drop that building, use their current driveways, and build new. Gum Branch Crossing is a new proposed shopping center that's currently under construction. This is across from River of Life Church, their new site on Gum Branch Road. It is proposed with 20 unit tenant buildings. It's 20 units proposed, but more often than not, we see with these tenant spaces that they do combine units. So it may not be 20 actual tenants in the building, but they do have that capacity. Currently, there is a self-storage facility also in review with this project. We expect that to be going to the city council in the next month or so. They are currently finishing up their TIA scoping and development to determine what improvements that they will be on the hook, so to speak, to do on Gum Branch Road along with a lot of the other development we're seeing there, and you'll see here in
Is
the
this
next few
gonna be
slides.
right next to where Lowe's Food is?
Yes, ma'am, it'll be on the other side of the stormwater pond that's kind of to the rear of Lowe's Foods.
That side entrance that you can go in if you're coming
Yes,
from
ma'am.
Richlands?
That will
Okay.
front directly onto that. It'll actually be behind the 20 unit shopping center, so you'll have bricked up climate controlled storage that you, I think they've compared it similar. There is a climate and storage there just on Market Street as you go into Wilmington now. It's a brick facade facility with windows on the front. You would be hard pressed to know that it was storage until you got into the site.
And that's because those 20 units are, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, are in front of the mini storage. So as you're driving along Gum Ranch Road and you look to the right, they're under construction now. There'll be shop space for multi-tenants. The 100,000 square foot mini storage would be behind it. So you may not even really see it from Gum Ranch just because of the way that the site is
We
configured.
really need this much mini storage?
Like Jeremy said, that somebody's done a study. and said
There is a
must be
study or
need.
somewhere where the need is there, and we'll see that there's, and I'll go ahead and brief on it now. I didn't include it in this presentation, but there is a 70,000 square foot climate control mini storage proposed at the corner of Old Maplehurst and 17, or South Wilmington Highway. Air Station Mini Storage Phase 2, Bailey and Associates. It just does not it's not going to be using city utilities, so I did not include it in this presentation, but.
It's right down where Autry's mini
That's right.
storage is.
Yep, that's correct.
There's getting ready to be a Kmart size one too.
Yep.
That's just crazy to me.
As far as the shopping center for Gum Ranch Crossing, we do not have any tenant applications other than the office for the mini storage is doing
27,000 square feet, is that comparable to the Lowe's Food Shopping Center?
No, that is maybe a quarter of the size.
It's very hard for me to understand
No,
what
but yes,
27,000
it's
square
about a
feet
quarter
is.
of the size. You're looking at about 3 of their out parcel buildings where Blaze Pizza is. If you combine them, that's what.
It's gonna be like the strip ones
Yes,
they're
ma'am.
building now.
Yes, ma'am.
Not another whole giant
No, ma'am.
shopping center.
But
Okay.
because of the way the Unified Development Ordinance classifies a multi-tenant building, it's still classified as a shopping center.
Okay,
Moore's Barbecue is directly across from the Gum Branch Crossing. It's under construction as well right now. They will use the access driveway that goes back to the River of Life Church. No new driveway on Gum Branch. I do not have an ETA on their completion, but I do know they're steady at work.
It's framed up now. I think they're starting to put the roof membrane on it, so.
If you've ever seen a Moore's Barbecue, it'll be the unique where it has the outside cooking and whatnot. And it will have a drive-through facility. Smithfield Chicken and Barbecue, what I've been told is their legend site, one of 2 of the first built in North Carolina there on Gum Ranch Road, is proposed to be demolished as part of their rebuild. They recently purchased the old Marine Federal at the corner of DeWitt and Gum Ranch. Their plans are to come in with a 2-phased site plan, which we are currently under review. They will drop the Marine Federal building and rebuild a site-sufficient location. And then once it's operational, they'll move their staff and employees over and then drop the original site, add some additional parking and a large green area for outdoor picnicking, as they said, but it'll be a green grass area. Like I said, we are currently reviewing that, and they've got some driveway issues to overcome because they have multiple driveways with those sites, but I expect to see it probably approved before the end of the year. Double slide, sorry about that. Splash and Dash, this is at the corner, and I did not rotate this map. It is flipped, I know, I apologize.
No, that's right.
Oh, okay, it did get flipped, I'm sorry. This is at the corner of Commerce and Western. Used to be an auto sales lot, I can't remember the name of it. They had a modular office building at the back of the site. Well, if you go by there now, it's completely down. They've primed the site, built it up, and they're paving and going vertical. They are currently working on a site plan modification because they ran into some issues with some overhead power lines in their dumpster location. But this will be a similar development in terms of operation as what is now, I think, the 3-minute wash, but it's a splash and dash on the other side of Western, down on, Northwest Park, near the State Employees Credit Union. Clean Green Car Wash, I'm gonna jump us all the way on the other side of town, near Freedom Village. This is the old State, Farm Bureau building. They have since dropped it. It's right beside O'Reilly's Auto Parts.
This is about built.
This is
It's got
almost
colors
done right
and
beside,
everything.
Pollard's Flea Market. They have they stalled out, I think, with COVID and what have it, and they had some environmental issues along the back because that's a very wet area. But as Ryan said, I believe they're gonna be finishing up construction within the next month or so. They've been going pretty quick, and that, to allude to that comment or question earlier, I think the Clean Green, with their name, as Mr. Hunter has said, that they pride themselves on reusing their water. That's kind of their motto. Lidle, this is a very, very early conceptual plan, as they are going through a traffic impact analysis right now. This is the corner of Parkwood and North Marine, the Garris Evans, thank you very much. It's been a long time, I think, since the city's seen some development at this intersection. And Lidle, along with an out parcel that we'll be developing as the Garris Evans is demolished, will be going there. Lidle is a comparative to Aldi. They're very similar companies, but they are not related. They just have similar names. They're both German-based companies. There's a Lidle in New Bern and Kinston, so if you have an opportunity, you can see them. They have very nice buildings, a lot of glass. Wilmington has one?
They have one right at the corner of Eastwood as you turn off for Military Cutoff.
Yes, I avoided the construction.
Somebody was just telling me recently, Jeremy, that two of their eastern North Carolina locations are closing. One of them may
Really?
be Kinston, I don't know.
They closed Kinston about a year ago.
Okay.
They never did do well over there.
Yeah, and there was one other location, I don't remember where.
Sure.
But Is what it is.
They're still moving forward here, but I mean,
Yeah.
obviously,
Sure.
anytime we hear stories
Yeah.
like that, we have concerns, but
Yeah, well, you can't run their business.
we
for them.
process them as they bring it
That's
in,
right.
and they haven't told us that they're not coming forward at this time,
Yeah.
so.
It'd be a new place for a mini storage.
Or a car wash.
They've executed the TIA and they're going forward with that, and the out parcel, no idea what it is, but the TIA will, and I don't mean this negatively, but worst case scenario, the TIA will assume it's gonna be like a drive-through or a high volume type business. Moving on to residential, this is the vineyards of, what was it called back then?
It used to be,
Cypress Creek.
Cypress Creek, that's what it
Village,
was.
yeah. But
And
it's been the vineyards, I think, for a while now.
if you've ever talked with staff, we called it the D.R. Horton track, we've called it a number of things, because it has been near to light several times, but a local contractor's taken it over and is working with Parker and Associates in developing this site. What the 191 single-family lots doesn't show you is there will be a commercial element to this as well that's out on Gum Branch.
So just for everybody's, if you look in that bottom left-hand corner, that's the River of Life Church, the Moore's Barbecue, those 20 shops that Jeremy just talked to you about, the mini storage, Lowe's Foods, the Circle K. This is kind of the happening geographic location right now, as far as a lot of different projects happening right now.
On top of some earlier this year or last year, there was some utility project. DOT's working on their improvements.
The intersection modifications.
These several developments are all partnering together on a TIA that's going to look at a light there coming out of this location, or is it in?
Yeah, that second
Yes.
driveway that you alluded to, right now, it's probably the main entrance, that's a full entrance on Gum Branch Road, right there coming out of the curve. So obviously, with the residential development on one side and then the commercial development on the other side, it will most likely meet the warrants to have a traffic signal installed, and that'll be part of the development cost. And they're
Brian, how
kinda
much
trying to
further out
pair
do you
together.
go down Gum Branch before you hit the end of the city?
The corporate limits is right past that.
At the power station or the
Pretty-
Circle K?
The power station.
Station?
We have the ETJ along Gum Branch as you go out towards, basically the Summersville School Road, but it's just the frontage, and that's ETJ, not city limits. But the city limits pretty much ends right there at the Circle K, right there at Lauderdale,
Gotcha, okay.
the Duke Energy site. Now, this large tract, it was annexed years ago. So they've been paying city taxes on that land for, I'd say 10 years at least, so.
And there is acreage, you can actually see it in the aerial on the other side of, what is the entrance to Manor Manor? And then there's some, that butts up against the, it's not, is it Living Water?
Mhm.
You get the
Christian school.
It's Living Water Christian School. So there is, whether, I would expect at some point in the future that will likely come into the city when it's developed, because we will be the only ones that have sewer capacity to provide development of that tract.
And as you see, I mean, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 things take place, other people will say, well, hey, that's where the growth's happening, we want to go there as well. So that's kind of what we're seeing.
So
And with this plan, I mean, has this one been approved yet? No, this is going,
was the
just about
sketch,
done.
and now they're coming in with their phases for them.
So this part, this 191 lots, it's been engineered. We're waiting for revisions to come in, but I mean, the water and sewer lines have been designed versus just kind of a concept plan. It's gone from concept to design plan. So as soon as this is approved, they can go out there and begin to install all the infrastructure. And then on the next one, he's gonna show you is just the sketch plan. And it's just a small phase to the north where there's bigger lots, and they decided to split it up. Originally, it was part of the first phase, but they split it off. But, I mean, this is your next single-family subdivision that I think you're gonna see just based on where they are in the process. You'll see on the other ones, we've had some other submittals, but this one appears to be kind of the front runner of the developments of single-family right now.
What do you anticipate the water and sewer usage being out of this neighborhood?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
I'm gonna follow Ryan's presentation with impacts that you can expect to our wastewater system.
Thank you, Wally. That helps me out.
So as Ryan was mentioning, this is another part of the vineyards. But I'll back up real quick. We're seeing the sections of this come in right now. Their first phase is Southern Charm and the hidden, I can't remember its unique name to it, but just like Williamsburg is broke up into St. James Park and Huntington and all that, they'll also have their subsequent phases for this subdivision. And just to the north of it is Southern Charm at the vineyards, and these are much larger lots. And they tie into it on two streets proposed, and this is 36 single-family lots. Moving over to Drummer Kellum Road, this is the south, closer to Newbern Highway. This is 95 single-family home lots proposed.
And actually, I may have misspoke. This one actually is, from what I understand from talking to the engineering firm, this is supposed to start construction in the next week or two. So actually, this is ahead of the vineyards. So this is off of Drummer Kellum, so on the north side of town, off of Newbern Highway, between Ramsey Road and Newbern Highway.
The little apartments to the Country View Apartments to the left on the map, they're established and they're the same developer tying in. And this was annexed some time ago as well.
So there's a pump station in this, I believe it's right here in this development area.
Right.
In fact, it may be the square back there in the middle.
It is.
And this is a satellite annexation.
Yes,
I
sir.
believe it is, yes.
Sir. Crescent Ridge on Ramsey Road, this is moving to the other side of Carolina Forest. This is 68 single-family lots. It will tie into the backside of Carolina Forest. I believe that was Savannah Drive is where it'll tie into, and then it'll have access directly onto Ramsey Road. while I did not highlight it, we do have it, the city recently annexed the property directly across from this on Ramsey Road, which is owned by the Teutons.
Little Creek Estates.
Yep, and we expect to see some forward movement on that too.
About 155 single-family lots on city infrastructure.
And I'll wrap up with this as it's under construction. I live in this area and I get a ton of questions on this development. This is the old, Blue Creek Southwest Strawberry Farms on Blue Creek Road, across from the Southwest soccer fields. This is Springfield Apartments, 80-unit apartment complex. It's currently under construction. They're still priming the property, leveling, grading, what have you. Same developers that developed Wingate Apartments over on Fairway Road, near the Kia and Hyundai dealerships.
And this will tie into that pump station that was
Just off.
installed in the southwest area that is actually the only tap, I believe, that tapped our force main. So this will be the first tenant, or have we taken on some existing
We took
customers?
them, as part of the agreement with the installation of that pump station, we partnered with OMWASA, and we took, I think it's called Springdale Acres. They had a small package plant, and that plant was failing, and the state stepped in and I believe approached OMWASA about taking it, and they approached us about partnering and constructing a wastewater lift station right there at the soccer fields, if you're familiar with that area.
The old strawberry
And
farm.
that actually goes into our system and pumps to Land App.
The old Southwest Strawberry Farm, for those that may know it as that. And there's also, there could be, in the future on the other track next to it, it could be another apartment complex. It's just not in the works at this particular moment in time.
They have indicated that would be another phase. There are a couple of developments I didn't include on the presentation because they're not the exciting ones, so to speak. We have some dental offices over in the Office Park area, one on Cliff Court that's under construction right now. And then another dental office that we are trying quickly to wrap up the review on, I cannot remember the street that one was on.
Is that Office Park?
Office Park Drive, Eastern Dental, but it is they have a doctor and they have their initial, upfit and building drawings in, just waiting for the site plan approval. But with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions Ryan or I could answer. Like I said, COVID has not slowed us down. In fact, I think once we went into shutdown, everybody said it's always an opportunity. Well, let's get all our plans approved because we went into overdrive in terms of plan review. I think when did we shut down? April. We had one of our busiest submittal dates since the last 2 years.
Jeremy, have you had any inquiries about the large vacancies at the mall? The Sears and Ulta?
You'll laugh. I've had someone ask about doing mini storages at Sears. I did fail to include, but Piney Green Shopping Center, the old Kmart there, Bailey and Associates, Monday night, the planning board will be considering a recommendation on approval of retrofitting the interior for climate-controlled storage.
Kmart sized.
Kmart sized. And then we will be taking that to the city council. If planning board makes a recommendation, we'll take it to the planning board or city council on October 20th. But as far as the mall, I've had the same question, and I've actually been asked about mini storage out on that out parcel at the corner of 17 and North Marine Boulevard, there beside the Lidl. Hopefully, it'll be one of those things, once we get the few approvals in, there'll be a super saturation and they'll pull off. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any more questions.
Just silly question.
Yes,
but
sir.
I know every submittal's different, but on average, when you get one, how long does it take before you actually start seeing construction?
It is very different per
Yeah.
the, a lot of it depends on your engineers and architect. If they're familiar with our processes and procedures, it can go very quickly. But I always tell folks, at least with the site plan minimum, build in a 90-day window. They can do their subsequent other submittals at the same time. But on average, I'd say 6 months to a year after submittal that they'll begin construction.
And if you think about it, let's just say let's use this apartment complex, for example. That's a site plan, that's an erosion control plan, that's a stormwater plan. That is water and sewer extension permits. That is building plan review. Am I missing any? That's a DOT driveway permit. So some people, they will go ahead and invest all into getting all of those permits reviewed and approved at one time, which, like Jeremy said, they have the ability to do. And others will say, you know what? Before I spend $50,000 or $100,000 on engineering a stormwater device and pond, I'm gonna get my site plan approved first. Because I gotta make sure that, it's worth going to the next part. So some people, they want the building plan reviewed before we've ever got the site plan approved. And if you've got, I'll use Moore's Barbecue as an example. If you've got something like a Moore's Barbecue where their building is pretty much cookie cutter, it's the same regardless of where they go. I mean, after all, we enforce the state building code. So other than our wind zone being different than Western North Carolina, it's the same building code. So the codes are the same. So an architect that designs that building makes it meet the state building code. Now, there are some nuances. For example, with our 2014 UDO adoption, we do have design standards that we require rooftop screening. We require a certain percentage of glass in the building. We require certain design elements. So the building might have to look a little bit different. That's why when you go to some place, you're like, well, man, that Walmart's got brick. How come ours doesn't? Well, we don't require brick. That's why our Walmart doesn't. More than likely, that town or city required that it be brick. So, the shell, if you will, of the building is probably the same, but what goes on the outside and what kind of goes above the roofs, that could be different based on local codes that are adopted by your town council, county commissioners, or city council.
Who decides on the retention ponds, you or the state?
It's actually a good question. Within the last 20 years, it was the state, and in 2006 or so, I believe.
Sometime around there. I think it was a little after that.
The city engineering, we have staff that reviews those plans. So, we felt like we could do the review more thoroughly, at a quicker time period. So the city decided to take on that review, and we are responsible. Now, the one exception to that would be if you've got an existing stormwater device and you're doing an expansion, or if you have a master stormwater permit and now it was approved 20 years ago, and now you want to develop a lot that's never been developed, you have to get an off-site permit. That could go back through the state, I believe. So it really depends, but if it's new construction, new stormwater device in the city, that now goes to the city engineering staff for review and is permitted here in the city.
And to add to that, when we looked at bringing that into the city for review and approval, we had a stakeholder committee that we put together, and it included contractors, engineers, surveyors, and what we looked at is, should we do this or not? Because originally what we did is pretty much adopt the state requirements. We really didn't go much above and beyond the state requirements. But what they all supported the city taking it over, because what was happening is it was going to the state, and to get it reviewed in the first, I don't remember the comment, but I want to say within the first 6 months, you had to pay like an expedited review fee, which they called their express review. And it really came down to service. The city could provide that service quicker. And quite honestly, when, they wanted to discuss something, especially the engineers and surveyors, some of their comments were, they felt like it was easier to get to city staff and get, interpretations and comments back than it was to get hold of somebody with the state. So there was a lot of push for the city to bring that. There's requirements that we have to meet, and ultimately the city is responsible for our watershed. So it makes sense that we would be the ones that would review and approve and ultimately enforce the ongoing maintenance of those ponds. So that's why it was brought in-house, and I don't remember when, but it was somewhere around the 2006, 7, 8 timeframe, if I remember right.
Any other questions? Thank you,
All right.
Ryan and Jeremy. That was
for
very
having us.
good.
So following on what Jeremy talked about and Ryan, I thought it was beneficial, you being the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, that you know what is out there, that you have some understanding of the development process, and then some of the projects that we are seeing come down the pipeline. I think that it's important to note that, when somebody's speculating on a piece of property, they may come and talk to us and everything is verbal. So when we're looking at that, we pay attention to that. We make notes on what people are looking to do with that property, where that property is, where it is in relation to our system, what improvements might we need in the future to serve that parcel. And we track that so that as we're putting together plans and, master planning and looking at our model, we at least have something to plug into that. Because if I had a crystal ball, I can tell you I wouldn't be here. So it's we have to use the information that comes to us. So as we're going through that and people get more serious, you get a preliminary sketch. Well, there's some money tied up into that preliminary sketch. They have surveying fees. They have, draft fees. They've probably at least looked at whether they can serve that site, what we call a back of the napkin calculation, where they've looked at it to at least see that they can serve that site with the existing infrastructure that's in place, or what size mains they may need in the case of sewer, whether they need a lift station or multiple lift stations. So they get some idea of what the coming cost is. And then they move into the engineering part. And in the engineering part, there's some real investment there. While it's all on a piece of paper, I remember Mr. Koenig at one point when he was working on Patriot Park, make a comment that he had $400,000 tied up in engineering fees on that parcel. And we haven't seen the first house or anything on that parcel. Now, I wasn't part of that, so I don't know. He just made that comment in one of our meetings. But, some of those in the construction industry can probably share that, there's real investment once somebody gets to the point of where they're moving forward with engineering. So with that, I thought it was important to kind of take a look at all of the development you've seen and talk about how we're preparing for that. So you saw this slide at your last meeting. The blue is the city limits. The green is the land treatment site. We have a total permitted availability of sewer of 10 million gallons, 9 at the land treatment site, 1 with Camp Lejeune. So again, I say 10 permitted because there's a whole lot of factors that go into that. But our permitted capacity is 10 million gallons. We have in the blue area, which is kind of where I'm going to focus today, about 230 miles of gravity sewer, 46 city wastewater pumping stations. For those of you that have driven down Bell Fork Road, a typical one would be the wastewater station that we have right there. It's on Bell Fork Road, right beside the fish market. That's kind of a medium-sized station. And then, of course, our largest, most famous one is the brick building right in front of Quartz Plus. That's our main pump station. And almost all of the wastewater in the city that goes out to Land App comes through that main pump station. Then we have one force main out to Land App, and that's 36-inch force main. And then we have 42 miles of force main. So those are the mains that connect the pump stations to gravity sewer. So basically, Jacksonville is pretty flat. What we do is we carry everything that we can by sewer, by gravity sewer. So there's no pumps or anything associated. It leaves the house, and gravity basically carries it to the lowest spot, which is where we set a pump station. And then we move it again, typically to another gravity sewer, and bring it until we get it to the main pump station. So we have 8 collection basins. Basically, those are those larger pump stations that eventually move it to the main pump station, you will see that the main pump station does have its own basin of wastewater that flows directly to it through either gravity mains or some smaller ancillary stations. But tonight, what I want to do is kind of focus on two of those, the Henderson and the Brookview basins. And the reason I want to do that is because much of the development that Ryan and Jeremy talked about is within those two basins, especially the notable as it would put pressure on our water and wastewater system. I'm not saying that the other developments aren't as important, but they don't put as much pressure as a 500 lot subdivision does, or a gateway marketplace commercial development. So what I want to do is kind of focus on those two. I mentioned that as we're meeting with those that are speculating on parcels or those that are looking at developing parcels, we take notes. We do have some master plans as they relate to sewer. We kind of started with an overall system master plan in 2006. Before that, all we had was a few engineering reports, but we did not have any sort of formal master plan. And then in 2011, we updated that master plan based on the development that had happened, and again, additional speculation that we had seen or talked with potential developers. In 2018, we did a small area plan that was tied in with kind of the North Marine Town Center area, which is right there at the intersection of Piney Green and 17. And we also looked at the Patriot Park area. So that master plan was kind of all wrapped up into that Piney Green North. So what we did is we looked at, with those two developments as kind of anchor points, how far out or what improvements will we need to serve out 17 North? And we kind of looked just as on a fringe out as far as about the pit out there on 17 North near Morton Trucking. So just to give yourself a boundary, that's kind of about how far we looked out. If we were looking at undeveloped land in that area, could we serve that, or will we be able to serve it? Because it would be difficult, especially sewer-wise, for anybody else to serve it unless they built their own small package plant. And we did that based on discussions that we had interest in some of the area out 17 North. It wasn't something that we just said, oh yeah, this spot on the map looks great. It actually came from conversations that we were having. Now, other than the North Marine Town Center, we really haven't seen a lot come of that development, but we did look at what it would take to serve that area. And some of that went into the decisions that were made and that we had agreements with to carry water down or wastewater down Piney Green Road to the base.
Can I add something, Wally?
Sure.
That North Marine Town Center right behind the Carmax, we had a site plan approved back in the 07 to 2010 timeframe when we had 4,600 units of multifamily units approved, only built about 3,600 of them. 370 units, apartment units, were part of that North Marine Town Center development. So to kind of go to what Wally talked about, when we met with people, we took notes, they actually had the engineered plan. So we kind of thought with those thousands of dollars that they spent, we thought that they would come to fruition. Unfortunately, they haven't, but engineering and staff had to kind of plan on it. So, I mean, that's just one large development that didn't happen there. But we thought that it would.
And I should add that in 2018, what we did is combined a few other plans into that too. So we had a few smaller plans that we combined into that. So that does, while it says 2018, it does predate that time because we took other smaller, just small area plans and kind of rolled them all into that one larger plan. So that's is a major plan. Mr. Nickel, you had a question?
I did. How far down 17 does the city limits go? And are you talking, some of the things you're talking about would be extraterritorial, or would they have to be annexed?
Yes. So the city limits go down just short of Wolf Swamp. I think it actually The Toyota place is in city limits.
In that corner of Wolf Swamp.
Is the Pumpkin
so it
Center in
does go
city
to Wolf
limits?
Swamp.
No, that's ETJ. So from
Okay.
County Green Road north, you've got the Stevenson Hendrick Toyota has been annexed.
Right,
You've got the Carmax there at the corner that has been annexed. And then you have a few of those large tracks that are ETJ, not city limits. And then at the corner, we had a gas station, I think that was a Speedway.
Yes, it was.
That was, it may have even been approved, just they never have built. So you had a lot of growth potential there, it's just some of it's not come to fruition.
at the corner of Wolf
Yet.
Swamp and 17.
Right.
Okay,
So the ETJ stops at the creek right past that.
okay,
So, right past Pumpkin Center, that's where the city's jurisdiction ends.
So much like we had over by the high school, people could ask to be annexed, but you don't have a responsibility down 17 any further than the Toyota?
Correct. And anything, anything that they would want to, that a developer would want to construct and bring to us would have to be voluntary annexation. We couldn't, we can't go involuntary annex Riegelwood just because they're in that area. It has to be requested. And typically where you see that is where a developer wants to construct a subdivision or a commercial development and they want city services. So they request before they ever subdivide the parcel out to annex, so there's your voluntary annexation, so that's how you end up with something the size of Carolina Forest or the Vineyards being annexed.
Like what happened behind White Oak High School,
Correct.
and
There
what we're
is-
anticipating might happen in Southwest.
Correct.
We don't, city doesn't have that, but if somebody wanted to develop it, you have to be prepared for the water and sewer for that area. And you're looking down 17 that they will not want to be on county or a septic system, they'll want your services.
Correct. So with that, and then the only other thing I'll mention is in 2018, we updated our water system, our wastewater system model. And we have both a water system model that includes all pipes. It was developed by McKim and Creed, I believe. And we have a wastewater model that I think was developed by Black and Beach, or Black and Beach hosts it for us now. And we did, when Alden Cox was here, we had some ability to update that in-house. Unfortunately, when he left, that ability for us to do it in-house left with him. But in 2018, we actually did some small area updates. And I'm going to share a few of those with you tonight. So this is the Henderson Basin. So just to kind of orient you, it kind of follows 17 North out, and kind of out around the Commons area, and then back up to Carolina Forest and back across, all the way back down to the New River and Cheney Creek. So that's kind of the Henderson Basin. All of the wastewater in that basin flows to, sorry, I can't draw on the map, but in the lower left corner near the river, there's the Henderson pump station. It's right beside the cleaners. Is it A1? So it's right beside A1 cleaners. And then from there, it pumps directly over to the main pump station. That current lift station is over 1 million gallon a day lift station. So it's a major lift station. Some of the challenges we have is we recently rehabbed that lift station, and when we did that, we did upgrade it slightly, but we basically upgraded it to the maximum that we could upgrade it with the existing wet well and infrastructure. So we put larger pumps in. We actually, if you'll remember, it was kind of a enclosed structure. We opened that up, and we went to submersible pumps, and we did that probably within the last, 8 years or so. But as part of this, we looked at the light purple is the developed areas in that basin. So we collect wastewater from all of that light purple area. The darker purple area is vacant parcels located within that basin that has reasonable access to the mains. So a lot of those are, if you kind of look to the left where you see some of the smaller dark purple parcels, those are, for example, Shilsky Office Park. there's some vacant parcels left in there. The infrastructure's been installed. All they've got to do is come construct the building and tie into it. So there, you have those vacant parcels that already essentially have service. Now, there is a large parcel which used to be the Tallman tract that was cut in half by Jacksonville Parkway, but there's reasonable access kind of on either side. From on the left side of the Parkway, you could possibly get into that parcel from Sherwood Forest, the back of Sherwood Forest, with sewer, not necessarily driving, but with sewer. We have a main trunk sewer that follows Doty's Branch, which is the blue line that you kind of see that goes across the parkway there. And so there's reasonable access to that parcel. And then what we have is kind of they're outlined but not shaded, and they say future areas. But those would need larger infrastructure investments, but ultimately that's where it would need to be, ultimately that's the basin that it's going to come to. So it's important to note that of those small dark purple that are basically they are in the basin, and most of those are annexed. There's 330 acres of undeveloped parcels there. If you look at the future areas we've identified, there's 680 acres. I think it's important to note that 2 of the future areas that we've denoted there, primarily the top left-hand, I don't know what you call the hammer-looking shape there, and then the hourglass below it, are 2 of the parcels that Jeremy talked about tonight. And I'll go into those a little bit more. But those, while we identified them as future areas, we had talked to those developers, they need major investments to bring wastewater back into the city. Matter of fact, both of those parcels will require some sort of pump station.
Well, you got Gateway that's in there, and also the,
and thank you for pointing that out. Gateway is actually in white in one of the future areas, but you'll notice that we kind of highlighted the area beside that, because that's when we originally had discussions with people looking at that property. They were actually looking at the parcel beside Gateway, not necessarily the parcel that ended up being purchased and developed. So it's important to note that that area has now come into the city and taken up some of that additional remaining capacity that we have in Henderson Pump Station.
Wally?
Yes, sir.
You were mentioning some of these areas would require extensive infrastructure. Is that going to be paid for by the fee that we used to call the facility fee?
I'll get into that too.
Whether, or is that going to be overtime, or will that be, they have to pay that up front?
I'll get into that too.
Thank you.
So this is the Brookview Basin. This is the other basin that Jeremy talked a lot about. This has the Moore's Barbecue, the Smithfields, the River of Life Church that was just constructed, Lowe's Food, the Speedway, and most notably is the largest tract where the future area actually points to, which is the Vineyards. And you can see that undeveloped parcels in this area are roughly 790 acres. A lot of that is the kind of pink area that you see, kind of the bottom left, is actually part of the Williamsburg Plantation original master plan when they were looking at Williamsburg Plantation. So we expect that in the future that will likely be developed out, but we haven't had, other than 1 or 2 small approvals, we really haven't had many conversations with with Williamsburg Plantation continuing. Although that's where the vacant property is, there's reasonable access to city water and sewer, so that's something that you can expect in the future will likely develop. And then in the future identified area, you'll notice that we identified 850 acres of that. Again, the outlined white area that will come to the Brookview Basin, and that equivalates out to about 1.1 million gallons per day. So, you know, I mentioned that Henderson lift station was already about 1 million gallons a day, and, you know, we can't go much larger with it. So you're talking about something, you know, that we're gonna have to provide for, that's the size of that basin again.
That's assuming that it's residential, it's built out as residential.
We actually looked at, we parceled it out. So we said, you know, using the existing development, X number of acres would be residential, X number of acres would be commercial. And then using the, you know, industry standards, we applied so much gallons per acre for residential and then so many gallons per acre for commercial. So again, that's where if I had a great crystal ball.
You wouldn't be here.
What we did is we looked at kind of existing development and kind of said, averaged it out, you know, so many acres be residential.
Our city makeup looks like today.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, you know, so that's the best we can do. And, you know, the harder part is we're talking about when will this happen? You know, is it going to be 10 years from now or 30 years from now? And those are things that, you know, unfortunately we just can't foresee, but we recognize we need to be prepared for because it, you know, in the case of the vineyards, it could be next year. So, with that, I kind of highlighted.
On that, the question I have is, if you've estimated 48% commercial and the rest residential, does that limit planning in the future to try to meet that since your system is geared to that? Or do they just do whatever the client comes in and says, I want it all commercial?
The market and the zoning is going to drive it. But we do have things like the land use plan to look at that kind of says, you know, this area is residential, this area is corridor commercial, this area is neighborhood business. So we do have documents that we can look at that provide guidance for the future. And when a rezoning comes in, one of the things that planning looks at and that the planning board has to consider is this area, what's the term I'm looking for, in conjunction with or follow the land use plan? Right. Or, you know, in many cases, the answer is yes, because we've looked at the major corridors and the existing development. But in some cases, the answer is no, and we have to go back and look at that, you know, that land use plan and modify that land use plan. But it does not, you know, market drives it. We don't limit just because we've said only 200 acres can be residential because of sewer. We do not limit a development to that. Yes, ma'am.
Question for you. We've talked in the past about the new pipe, additional pipe going to the land treatment site. Does this spate of interest move any of that planning forward?
I'm gonna get to that too. It's like you can read my mind. So,
it's just this long lead up to it.
With this, we have, you know, these are the 3 developments that we talked about tonight. You know, Jeremy showed you the first 2 sections. In talking with Parker and Associates, the vineyards is somewhere around 36 acres of commercial, which is kind of that portion closest to Gum Branch Road. And then 500 single-family, give or take, homes is what they expect to put there. The 68 lots in Crescent, and then the 153 across the road in the part that's now been annexed. I can tell you that this is, to serve this area, we're talking at minimum 3 pump stations, a lot of gravity sewer, and then water connections. And in some cases, the development is required to make all of the investment. So for instance, if somebody's developing a subdivision and they're making, you know, they're planning for their subdivision, and their subdivision basically would take, would require all of the improvements that are made
then they're responsible for the total construction of that. So they construct it in accordance with city standards. They turn the pump station, the water mains, and any force mains and gravity sewer over to the city for maintenance because they don't want to be in the long-term maintenance business. But they have to build it to our standards. But they upfront the entire cost. Then on top of that, because we have made treatment improvements, we expanded our wastewater treatment plant, we've expanded our water treatment plant, we've expanded Brookview Pump Station, Henderson Drive Pump Station. Those prior investments that the city has made to support growth is then used to calculate the system development fees. So that share of that cost would be paid, so those 500 single-family homes would pay those system development fees. But what they're paying for is not the construction of the internal system, it's the construction of the downstream improvements that were required to actually handle what that subdivision or that commercial development is bringing to the city system. So the improvements, many of the improvements we talk about where we serve growth is actually already calculated into the system development fee based on the master plans that we have in place and our capital improvement plan, which you review each year. And that's a 10-year capital improvement plan. So that's where the importance of that plan comes into place and helps setting those fees. And one of the, not trying to get too far down off of a tangent, but when we increased our system development fees several years ago, I have to give the development community, we had stakeholders from the development community, I have to give them a lot of credit because they supported the increase. Their one request that was that it be based on improvements to serve development. System development fees, by legislative law, we could pull some of that money that we collect and use it as part of our treatment process. If we need to, another piece of equipment at Land App to take care of the laterals or anything like that. Legally, we could use that money, but we don't. We've set that aside for growth to support itself. So with that, just to give you an idea, if we looked at the near-term improvements that are needed, this does not include those future areas that we talked about. Everything that you see in green is okay. So again, we're not talking about any of those future areas that we've just talked about being included in this. This is just current development and those parcels that are already in the basin that could easily tie into our system. Obviously, just like a stoplight, if it's green, it's good. If it's yellow, watch out. And if it's red, you're in trouble or stop. So, and then purple is actually, there's going to be wastewater coming out of that manhole based on the model and based on, what we would expect those to develop out at. So you can see there's a lot of improvements in those, I'd like you to focus primarily left in this picture of Highway 17, which is kind of that straight line that runs right under the Y in capacity. So if you focus to the left, that's really the majority of the improvements that are needed. So one option that we looked at is instead of making all of those improvements, is there something else that we can do? Which goes to Dr. Rashash's question in these basins. And what we've looked at, we have the master plan that supports this. We've actually done all of the design and acquired all of the right-of-way to construct this project. But it would be to set a new lift station with a capacity of 4 million gallons per day at the purple, the purple box you see there in the point between phase 1 and phase 2, the little half moon. And then to the left of that is the force main that would go all the way out to the land application site. And then going around that half moon would be gravity sewer to collect not only, collect, we'll say intercept wastewater that would be going through both Brookview and Henderson basins and tie it into this new lift station. Now, this lift station would not just serve future development. It would actually enable us to turn some of our existing wastewater, such as Carolina Forest, that whole development, into this system. So there's existing benefit because one of the things that we find under heavy rainfalls, we have challenges in that basin already. So this helps us relieve some of the pressure and eliminate improvements that we would have to make in that basin, even to see modest growth. So
Well,
this is,
if you go back a sec,
sure.
I have a question, and it's one of those weird piping questions. You have a 36-inch pipe on one side of the river, 36-inch pipe on the other side of the river, and a 24-inch pipe connecting them. Why?
It would be, there will probably be 2 pipes going under the river in the event, which is a very similar design to what we have on our 36-inch force main now.
So
Because that crossing is so large, instead of doing 136, you would do 2 24s for safety.
that would make me feel a whole lot better. Okay.
Yes, that's why it's a 24.
It's called, wait a minute, you're talking about stopping places, and that
Yes.
just didn't make
The,
sense.
the
Okay.
existing 36-inch force main is the same way. Where it goes under the new river, it's actually 2 24s instead of 136.
That'll allow for growth too, won't it?
We primarily do that. The 36-inch force main, and I'll let Jason correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember right, our 36-inch force main that we have going out to Land App is actually designed, it can handle the full 9 million gallons a day. And that's not really the challenge. The problem is we've seen instantaneous peak flows upwards of 17 to 20 million gallons over a 24-hour period. So it's not that it's just designed for the 9 million gallons a day. There's peak factors that are required to be built into that. So it's, yes, I mean, essentially you could say that we're certainly building for a lot more growth, but it's still got to meet all of the peak factors. Plus, we still can't, if we look at permitted treated capacity, we still can't treat more than 9 million gallons a day at Land App.
Yeah.
And then this is the projects that we would, by doing that one project, this is everything that we would be able to eliminate. You'll notice that there's a few in there that we would still need to improve. All of those improvements would be based on future development. The circled one right under sewer in the top right-hand corner, that improvement would be dictated by a development that we've had a proposal on before that's how large is the Country View Estates? Or it's Harvest Meadows or something.
119.
So there's 119?
Yeah, that sounds right.
119 lots that are proposed up off Drummer Kellum. This is satellite annexation that would come into our system by an existing pump station. So that improvement will be required to handle that additional flow. But all of those that are kind of grayed out would not be necessary as a result of the Western Regional Station project. The one that throws us off, and we can't figure out why the model throws it out, is that bottom circle. There's really not a whole lot of development proposed on that line. That line it kind of goes along and then stops. It doesn't go all the way out to 17 or 17 or Western Boulevard or anything. So we're not sure why that one highlights. We think that's a calibration thing along that line. But so that's something that we'll have to figure out, but the rest of those would go away. This is what that service area would look like. I showed you the Brookview Basin and the Henderson Basin, the size. So this is kind of what that project would be able to serve. Now, you'll notice I put a break in there, a phase 1 and a phase 2. With the project I just showed you, and I'll give you a better highlight of that project in just a second, that it would only go to phase 1. But in our master plan, we identified a phase 2 that would help us serve development potentially all the way out to Ramsey Road and around almost to Drummer Kellum. And this is the kind of the highlight. What we looked at is, the important thing to remember is, we're going to have to do improvements at some point. But we also, this is a major project. We don't want to invest $35 million in a project that isn't needed right now. So while we've done all of the engineering and we've acquired all of the easements that we'll need, all of the right-of-way that we'll need, we actually have all of the permits. Some of those will have to get extended. But we don't want to move forward with this project until it's needed. Now, what I will say is with everything we've showed you tonight, we're getting closer to that point. And the challenge is, it's not like while we have all of the permits, we have all of the design done, it's very important to remember that we can't just say, all right, we're ready to go and it's there tomorrow. The engineer's estimate for this project is that it'll take the better part of about 3 years to construct. And that's if we actually stagger contracts with multiple contractors. So the idea would be you bid the 2 force mains with one contractor, or the segment 1 with a contractor, segment 2 with a different contractor, and then you bid the pump station separately, and then the gravity sewer separately. So there are 2 years, 9 months. If you look at the schedule, actually has 5 or 6 contracts literally overlapping, which, as you can imagine, is not only difficult to manage. So it's not something that if we decided we're ready to go today, it's not going to be there to provide capacity in the next year. At minimum, you're 3 years out. And that's if everything goes smoothly. We'd have to directional drill underneath New River here, and that directional drill is over 1,000 feet long. That's not something that you just set up and do easily. So it's this is a major project that we've got. The other thing is this project, the last time we updated this engineer's opinion of cost was somewhere, was it 2016 or 17? Somewhere in that time frame. So what we're currently doing is watching the development, but we're also we're working with the engineer to update their opinion of cost because, 4 years later, you can expect prices to likely be higher. And this is one that we need to monitor. The other is, are there other, I can tell you about every time somebody brings me a grant opportunity, which happened after Hurricane Florence, there were all kinds of resiliency grants out there. This is one of the first things we go look at, could we find some sort of alternate funding source to help offset the cost? Now, I can tell you we haven't been able to pigeonhole it into a grant yet, but that doesn't mean we won't keep trying. We've also looked at, public water supply has low interest loans. Sometimes they'll do principal forgiveness for a portion of their loans. So those are other things that we're looking at. And then, of course, the way we funded the land application site were revenue bonds. So that's also a possibility. And right now, the revenue bond market is fairly favorable. So those are things that we'll continue to monitor. We updated city council on this it was right around COVID started, I believe, maybe the March timeframe. So this is something that we'll continue to watch. We will continue to update you and city council. But again, it goes back to, we're trying to monitor development, and right now, the two hottest basins that we have, also partially because land is readily available, is the Brookview and Henderson Drive Basin. So with that, I'll answer any questions. Nothing? All right.
Tonight's probably not the best time for it, but at some point, I would like to get a grasp, a better picture of all of your system development fees that you collect, what they are spent on throughout the year, you know, but, I mean,
Right.
if you collect $4 million this year, is.
I wish it was $4 million.
I would have thought that it possibly was, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I was thinking I might be low, but maybe not. Only because we write some of those checks, but again, what those funds are spent on, I know a lot of it is to go to this $35 million project, but, you know, so is there an account holding $2 million or $20 million or whatever? I just, that's one of the things that popped in my mind in looking at the cost of that, so.
So there's not a separate account, but it's accounted for separately.
Yeah.
But I can get you a list of, because we, as part of the state statute, we actually had to do a system development fee plan, and we have a model. So it's pretty easy to provide pretty much everything that we've calculated into the system development fees. So, and I can tell you that, if you give me one more second, the primary calculation that drives our system development fees was the land application site.
Sure.
At roughly $40 million, and the expansion, not the original site, but the expansion, and then that portion of the water treatment plant that was apportioned out to growth, because that was about a $47 million project.
Wow.
So those are, you know, that's the bulk of the calculation. That's not all of it, but that's the bulk of it.
Yeah.
And then from there, it goes to your pump stations would be next. Your major pump stations would be next. And then there's a little bit in gravity sewers and force mains, but the treatment plants and the pump stations are your largest drivers in that calculation. But we can provide that.
You know, I think my mind's trying to wrap around, is there a large bucket that you're paying immediately towards that 35 million, or do you need 35 million in funding?
We're probably gonna need the bulk of 30, well, I have to get back to you.
Anyway,
because
yeah, that's fine.
we're looking at, short answer is, we're looking at funding this in some manner with a loan, debt service.
All right.
And paying for the smaller projects with cash.
Gotcha, okay.
So.
If I could comment on something the finance director told us about 4 years ago. When they collect the fees, those fees go to pay the bonds that did the improvement that allowed that attachment. So when he gets a water main and they have to go out and get a bond, the rates pay that, but when the people hook on, they account for it separately, but then it helps pay the current bond.
Right.
It's not sitting there waiting for another project.
Right, it recovers costs.
It's recovering the cost that was incurred until they get a facility, somebody paying because they hooked up, rates are paying it, you and I.
Gotcha.
And then the only other thing that I haven't mentioned is one thing that, when the recession hit, up until the recession in, I don't know, 7, 8, where we were, development basically almost just stopped. One of the things that, up until that point, we required a developer to pretty much pay for everything that was required. So if they needed a new pump station as part of their development, but that pump station was also gonna serve, part of another development or another track, that original developer was required to install it and construct it to the size that was necessary to serve that basin. And then we put, the requirement on them to, if they wanted to recover a cost, they could get an agreement with the city, and any cost, any development that tied in, we would then return that cost to the original developer. But that was only for a period of like 10 years. That had a sunset period on it. The problem is, in the time I've been here, I had only seen maybe 2 of those put in place. And of the 2 that were put in place, very little actually recovered because people beside them either just waited it out for the 10 years or it just didn't develop within that 10 years. And one of the challenges we saw, especially with a track like the Vineyards track or the Cypress Creek track, is it makes it difficult, especially during a recession period, for a developer to come in and upfront that large of a cost. And that's one of the things with our stakeholder committee that they said to us was, that's a large cost for us to upfront. So we did put into place where we have in our fee schedule a sewer service area. And what we've done is, it is in keeping with our master plan, and there's some parameters that wrap around it, like it has to serve a larger basin than this one development. But the city can partner or possibly even upfront a portion of cost for the backbone infrastructure. But what we do for that basin is we basically highlight that basin. We include it in our fee schedule. And let's say that right now a single family home to tie in is roughly $6,000. I think it's closer to $6,100. But let's say it's $6,000. Well, let's say that the city invested in a service area. Again, it's larger than just one development, but the city invested in a service area, and we have the equivalent of, a $200,000 investment. And let's say to tie in homes into that, it equates out to recover our money an additional $200 per home. So if you develop in that area, you would pay the $6,100 plus another $200 because you're in that service area. But what we've done is we've identified that, that station or that backbone infrastructure is really limited to a smaller development area than citywide, like a treatment plant. So we do have, that's kind of a third structure that we do have in place that came about with when the recession hit. We did have a few that developed under that. And in some of those, it was actually an agreement with the developer that we entered into agreement. Developer paid X amount, we paid X amount. And on our amount, we collect that service area fee. And we've done that for water and sewer. We don't do that a lot, and we wouldn't do that if it's just to serve one development. Yeah. But we do have that as kind of a third alternative. And that's in addition to the system development fees. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you.
Do we have any other topics for discussion?
I do not.
All right, our next scheduled meeting is Thursday, November 12th at 5:30. And having no other business, if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Aye, all opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
You may find this sheet that you